So, yesterday I went car shopping. And online I saw this car. It was a 2004 Toyota Avalon. Pretend this is that car because I don't have a replica of that car. So, yeah, it was in my price range, only $2,200. So I said, okay, let's give this car a test try. So, I walked to this dealership, which is close to a mile away from my home, so it's within walking distance. So yeah, I walked to the dealership and I say, hey, I want to test drive this car. So, so there, in this one specific dealership, there was something you had to sign in order to test drive the car. And the funny thing is, the guy was like, oh, it's just standard stuff. You can just sign it. Everyone signs it. And I'm like, do you really expect me to sign a contract without reading it? Like, what kind of fool do you take me for? So I read the contract. It basically just said that you could not take the car anywhere further than 10 miles from the dealership, and if you did, they would charge you $2 per additional mile you drove. Which is something I would have to know before signing something like that. So I said, okay, the route I have planned is less than 10 miles, so I'm okay with signing this. So I get to the 2004 Toyota Avalon, and the car doesn't start. And I'm like, you seriously expect me to buy a car that won't start? I said, and hey, the car doesn't start. What gives? And they're like, oh, the battery is dead. It just needs to be jump started. And I'm like, okay. Now, some people probably walk away right after that, but here's the thing. If the battery's the only thing that's wrong with the car, then, I could just buy the car and then get a new battery for it. And I had enough money that I could do that, so that didn't really seem like too much of an issue for me. But only if that was the only thing wrong with the car would I consider getting it. So, they jump start the car. The car starts correctly after that, so I'm thinking, okay, it's running smoothly. But then the RPMs start to slow down, and I'm like, okay, so the car is idling, and the RPMs are like, it sounds like it's gradually slowing down. Like, I don't think that's normal because all the cars that my parents have had, the RPMs were always constant. They would always idle at 1,100 RPM, sometimes a little bit slower in winter weather, but they would never sound like they were just slowly, slowing down. So he said, oh, that's probably just because of the cold weather. Then he revved the engine and he says, sounds okay to me. And I'm like, well, of course you're going to say that. You're the person trying to sell me the car. Of course you're going to tell me it sounds okay, and then I'm going to drive it up the lot and it's going to catch on fire. For those of you that are new to my channel, that actually did happen to a car I bought in the past. They told me, oh, it's okay, it just needs a little this and a little that. Things that you could easily do because, the parts that I need weren't that expensive. Well, based on what they said anyway. But then I buy the car, I get it on the highway, then it catches on fire. So yeah, I don't trust anything a dealer says, especially if they tell me that something I don't think is normal for a car is normal to them. So the RPMs are at a constant 1,000 RPM. So I guess that's okay, I said to myself. So I started testing the car again. I basically pressed every button, knob, and switch to make sure everything was working. There were no errors on the dashboard, so it looked like the car was in good enough condition that it could drive. I opened the hood, checked the engine, and basically did the same inspection I was trained to do as a truck driver to make sure the engine was in a good enough condition to be driven. And everything looked fine. There were no leaks. The only real problem was the front tires would need to be replaced sometime soon. But that too I could have afforded to do in like a week. So that wasn't much of an issue either. So to give the engine the ultimate test, I turned everything that's electronic on. I turned the radio on with the volume up. I turned the windshield wipers on. I turned the air conditioner on all the way up. Basically ran everything while the phone was plugged into the cars too. As well. Basically, I ran everything electronic to make sure it didn't slow down the engine because I once test drove a car where as soon as you turned the air conditioner on, it nearly shut off. So I want to make sure that's not a thing that I have to worry about while driving the car. So with all the electronics running and the phone plugged into the cigarette lighter, everything was working for a while, but then after like a minute, the engine's RPM slowed down to 900, which did concern me a little bit. I don't think I remember any of my parents' cars slowing down to 900 RPM with anything running. So yeah, that did concern me a little bit. But I said, you know what? The RPMs are constant. It's not shutting off. Maybe that's good enough to give it a test drive. So I closed the doors, put my seatbelt on, and began to drive the car. I left the dealership, drove for 2 blocks, but then the oil light came on. And for those of you that are new to my channel, the last car I bought, the oil light came on very shortly before the car caught on fire, and I didn't even have enough time to pull over off the road before this happened. So I said, okay, I'm not taking this car on a test drive because the oil light is on. It's not safe to continue moving. My experience with cars, there's a risk of a fire if I keep driving this. So with the full-way flashes on, I made a U-turn, drove very slowly with the RPMs as low as they possibly could be while the car was moving, went back to the dealership, and I said, hey, the oil light's on. I'm not going to buy a car with the oil lights on. Then I explained to them, the last car I bought, the oil light came on moments before it caught fire. And then they said to me, well, that's weird. Usually an oil light doesn't lead to a fire. And I'm like, oh, so basically what happened to me never happened. It was just a figment of my imagination and a nightmare that I still get sometimes. But it never happened in real life because oil lights aren't dangerous apparently. So they said, okay, we'll have our mechanic look at it and see why the light's on. And I'm like, okay, sure, knock yourself out as long as it's free. And they said, yeah, it won't cost anything. So I'm saying, okay, so they're going to have one of their mechanics look at it. So clearly, they're just going to say that there's nothing wrong with it to try to convince me to buy it. Because there's no way their mechanic would ever, that's employed by them, would ever tell them that the car needs something that would stop me from buying it. Because, you know, it's their job to, well, whatever, you get the point. Anyway, so they bring the car back and they tell me, oh, the oil light is coming on because it needs a new pressure sensor. So replace the sensor and the light won't come on again. But it should be safe to drive currently. And I'm like, you expect me to trust an oil light being on and just continue to drive the vehicle? Because that's insane. Like, when I was a truck driver, one of the first things they told me was, as soon as the oil light comes on, shut the engine off immediately because every second that engine is running, it is being damaged from the inside. So yeah, you're giving yourself an expensive engine repair bill if you keep the car running with that light on. So I said to myself, okay, I'm not going to buy this car. Well, actually, first I calculated the odds that that this car would in fact catch fire, and mathematically it had a 33% chance of that happening if I continued to drive it. So I said, okay, 30% is not good. I would only buy a car if it had a 0% chance of catching on fire. So yeah, so I said, okay, I'm not buying that car. Then I just walked home.